Good morning, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of Renee Talks. Today, I have my good friend, Mr. Micah Jackson. He's here to share his story. He's a recent, he's recently recovered from COVID-19. Micah, you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Micah Jackson, as she said. And I currently live in Michigan, but I used to live in Arkansas. And me and Miss Renee actually used to go to church together some years back. So I was excited when she asked me about doing this interview, and hopefully I can share something that'll be a blessing to somebody.
Okay.
Mhm.
I just want to ask you, what did you what did you think when they first told you that you might have COVID-19?
Um, well, I knew it was going around, and there were people getting sick. And honestly, it was my wife was the one who told me I needed to go get tested, right? And this was probably a few days into the symptoms. And so I didn't want to think that it was, coronavirus or COVID-19. That's not what I wanted to think. I was just a little cold. I was outside in the cool breeze without a hat on or something like that. So I didn't want to really even consider that possibility. But honestly, I had to, since it was going around. And I noticed that there were a few people, even in my job, that were kind of coughing and going on. So I didn't want to think that's what it was, but I had to be realistic at the same time.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and let you start, and you can just flow however you feel. Just tell us your story.
Okay, well, um, as I said, I live in Michigan, and if you've paid any attention to the statistics, Michigan was one of the hardest hit areas. Not as hard as New York, but definitely hit hard. And I believe the reason for that is uh, Michigan being like the auto center, or auto capital. Most of the cars are made here in the U.S. So there's a lot of people that fly in and out of the country and in and out of the country and just all over. So the area that I work in is Oakland County, which was the hardest hit area in Michigan. And like I said, I had kind of noticed, when we first started hearing about COVID-19, you kind of hear it and don't hear it. It's kind of easy to ignore at first, to be honest, because you don't really think that it can really hit that close to home. So I was going to the gym 4 times a week, um, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and Saturdays. And like I said, going to work and working in close proximity with a lot of people. And I remember a Monday, it was March the 16th. And I went to work and I just had a really bad headache. Uh, it was an unusual headache, worse than any one I'd ever had before. And then Tuesday, it was the same. And Wednesday, it was the same. I mean, when I say a bad headache, like it's not just a couple minute or hour headache that just kind of comes, but it was like literally five grown men in my head, like trying to kick their way out. Like it was horrible, horrible headache. And also Wednesday, I noticed that I had started to cough a little bit, and I like I said, it's just a little cold. It's kind of cool outside. I know I was outside last night without a hat on, just trying to make sense of it. And then Thursday is when I had a fever. And that's when my wife was like, yeah, you're going to get tested for coronavirus. Now, she's a nurse practitioner, so, that was her recommendation. So I did. On March 20th, I went and got tested. And now, mind you, at that time, test results weren't coming back um, like really fast. So it actually took 9 days to get the results of the testing back. Now, also mind you that I'm like 5 days into the symptoms. So I immediately go into quarantine. After they took my temperature, when I went to get tested, it was like 101 point something something. And they were like, yeah, you do have the symptoms, so we're going to take you off work. So that was March 20th. And for the next 2 weeks, I was locked in this room I'm in right now, actually. This is like my little office, and my bedroom is right next door. So that was the only access I had to the house. My wife cut me off. You know,
Did you
she,
have, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
oh,
Did
go
you
ahead.
have any fears about transferring it to your family? You
Oh,
and
absolutely. Absolutely. That was probably my biggest concern, even more so than my own health. Like, just making sure that we contained it. And like I say, my wife, she made absolutely sure. Like, she kept me up here. Like, if I got caught downstairs or something, you know, she
mm,
would she would rush me right back up.
okay. She handled the business.
Yeah, she did, because I do have a small son. He's only 19 months,
Mm-hmm.
and my wife's here, and my sister-in-law is here because she kind of keeps our son while we go to work and things like that. And she has a compromised immune system already due to sickle cell. So I really didn't want anything to happen to them. So, and I thank God, I'm thankful to God, absolutely,
Yeah.
that neither one of them, nobody else in the house ever came down with COVID-19. And I give God all praise for that.
That's a true blessing.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And it was rough. And honestly, the quarantine part was probably the toughest part. Now, it's one thing to be on a stay at home order, but when you're on a stay at home order, but you're also quarantined in your own house, it's difficult, because we work so much and we don't have a whole lot of time during the week to spend together. So to actually be at home and know that my wife's in the house, and to hear my son running up and down the hall and not be able to like really interact with them, that was probably even more difficult than the physical part for me.
I can imagine it was tough. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a situation, but yet you love them so much you didn't want to contaminate them. But the separation was a cause for for anxiety as well. So I understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. That was by far the toughest part. Not that the physical part was easy, but I'm not really a fearful person. I don't fear sickness or disease or the terror by night or the arrow by day, if you will. Like, I don't fear those things. So I always kind of felt that I would recover, that God is going to take care of me and I'm going to come through this. So, I mean, I did my time, and like I said, my wife's a nurse practitioner, so she gave me some recommendations for some medicines and stuff to take, because the fever was bad. Like, I don't get cold. Like, I do not get cold. It's very rare for me to be like, "Whew, it's cold," but the fever was so bad that I was actually having chills, and I couldn't understand, like, okay, how can my temperature be 101 degrees, but I'm sitting here shivering?
Mhm.
So I was taking Tylenol, which would break the fever, and I was taking NyQuil at night, which would help me sleep. And then in the daytime, I was taking Mucinex, which kind of broke things up before it had a chance to set in my lungs. And Mucinex kind of makes you cough.
Mhm.
So I was able to kind of keep coughing stuff up, and spitting it out, which I think was also a part of the reason that I was able to recover so quickly by God's grace and the knowledge that my wife has in the medical field. And I was able to pull through. But the whole thing to me, I think it lasted probably 18 to 21 days from the first symptoms until I had went 3 days with no symptoms. So, like I said earlier, it took 9 days for the results to come back. So when the doctor called me and shared the results with me, I was like, well, okay, well, I'm almost well now, So I'm just thankful to God that I was able to go through it. I know that there was a purpose in it, and I'm glad to be alive and healthy today. There's no fever, no coughing, no aches, no pains. Everybody in my house is doing fine, and we give God all the credit for that.
Awesome. So when you first saw the doctor, when they tested you, did they have any advice for you? They didn't hospitalize you or anything like that?
No hospitalization. They actually did the testing at I don't. It's up here. They have places called urgent cares.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not, they're kind of like emergency rooms without having a whole hospital.
Okay.
So that's where I went. On one of the college campuses here, they were doing testing for coronavirus. So I went out there and got tested, filled out the little survey about what symptoms I was having, and they were like, "Yeah, you should get tested." So they did. First, they did a strep test to see was it strep throat. And then they did a flu test, and I had never had a flu test. And I tell you, it is horrible. It is horrible because they take these long Q-tips and they go as far as they can go up your nostril, and it's horrible. So those things came back negative, so they went ahead and did the corona test, which is similar to the flu test. They just take a swab and go in your nasal cavity, and that's it. But no hospitalization. They gave me a letter to give to my job saying that I needed to be home quarantined for at least 14 days.
I think one thing I find shocking, you said you were sick for, was it 19 days?
I would say the whole thing from first symptoms to 3 days with no symptoms, with anywhere from 18 to 21 days.
And so, because most of the time they'll tell someone that thinks they may have the virus to go home for the 14 days. So that's really not kind of like a sufficient time.
Yeah, that's true. I think, and it was kind of a what's the word? Kind of a stipulation or something extra on the sheet because it was like 14 days or until 3 days with no symptoms.
Okay.
Yeah, but at that time, the recommended quarantine was 14 days.
Well, I know until I had read about your testimony, you shared, on Facebook, I really was kind of taking it lightly. We were kind of making plans, for the summer and everything as normal. But when I read that you had recovered from it, it really, really hit home for me. What advice would you give to those that are taking it lightly? They're just saying, okay, it's business as usual, and they're going back to their normal routines.
Take it easy. Like, be wise, be patient, be safe. And I was kind of having this conversation with somebody on Facebook the other day, and I was a little disappointed. I don't know if he knew that I had coronavirus, so I was just kind of listening at the things that he was saying. And then when I informed him that I did have coronavirus and it's worse than what you think it is, the conversation kind of stopped. Like I never got another response. So I would tell people to go easy. The world is going to be here. Like it's going to be here. This is a good time to, and I know that different people have different situations and money is tight and the jobs may be closing down and we need to get back to work. And at the end of the day, your health, your well-being, your life is much more important. So I told my wife, I don't care what they opened up. We had tickets to the Pistons games. We had two different concert tickets, things that were happening, later this year. We had trips and stuff planned. We canceled all of that stuff for the simple fact that it's not, even if they open things up, like there's no reason for me to run right back out into the crowd. because I believe what's happening is that more people are getting infected as things are opening up. So I'm just taking my time, and I would advise people to do the same thing. Look, just give it time, let it pass, be sure, be safe, be patient, be wise.
And you kind of talked about your faith a little bit, but do you believe that it was your faith that truly saw you through this ordeal?
I do. I really do. Because you really have to set up um, some strengthening things in your mind and your spirit. That's why a relationship with God is good to carry on. It's not something that you want to try to get when things are bad. You want to already have that in place. That's the things that kind of help builds your faith and things like that. And the devil tried to play a mind game with me. I mean honestly, because when we first started hearing about coronavirus, I was in my word and I was reading Psalms 91, and I was quoting it and declaring it and all of these things, but I still got hit. So the first thing the enemy said is, yeah, so you quoting all of that word and all of these scriptures and stuff, but you still around here sick,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. So, I mean, my first few days of quarantine, like it was a battle, a bit of a spiritual battle. I had to really silence the enemy and let him know that I know who God is. You can't trick me. You know what I'm saying? I believe that God has purpose for my life beyond this sickness. So I know that this is not going to stop me or take me out. And I believe that was why I recovered so quickly, because I just never believed that it was going to be something that could take me out or put me in some kind of permanently disabled state. No, not at all.
So I'm really glad that the Lord healed you, and that's an encouragement to others. And that's really what we have to do, is to keep the faith, because the enemy is the accuser of the brethren. So he's always going to be in our head, like, you're not going to make it. But to have the word inside of God inside you and to know God personally, I believe that it was just, the catalyst that helped you to heal. And it's a testimony to the awesome power of God, because all power is in his hands.
Mm-hmm.
In heaven and earth. And I think a lot of times as Christians, we quote the word, like you said, and when we get sick or we face the trial, then it's a real test. And, it's a test to see like what's in you. And a lot of times I'll say that I believe God counts us faithful when he tests.
Oh, yeah.
He counts us faithful to be tested, and he knows that we're going to succeed.
Absolutely. And people need to understand that the word of God is a roadmap, for us to live by, and a lot of things for us to really consider in our everyday lives. But just because you read the word and God, that doesn't make you immune to tests, to trials, to tribulations, to sickness. What that does is that gives you something to fall back on when tests and trials and tribulation and sicknesses come. So don't ever think for any moment that you're immune to something because you know God. Like, that doesn't happen. If you don't believe me, ask Job. He knew God too, but he got hit, but it was his faith in God that allowed him to recover. And I believe that that's the same thing that happened in my personal life.
Yeah, and I think there's a misconception. People think, well, because you're saved, that you don't go through anything. You're not supposed to go through anything. He didn't promise that we wouldn't have trials and tribulations when we're saved, but he promised to be with us during the trial and the tribulation and to see us through.
Yeah.
And so I'm so thankful to you for sharing your story, and I can't stress enough that it really changed things for me, and it really made me pay attention, because we were talking about meetings for the summer for work and things like that. And my sister was asking me, well, are we still going to go on the meeting? She said, because, this corona. And it really didn't, it was like this thing that was way, far away in China or wherever it was, other countries, but I didn't see it as something that was relevant to me. And that was a wake-up call to find out that you had it, and I'm certainly glad to hear that you recovered. But it made me more cautious, because I was just going around. I wasn't really, really taking it, into consideration that it was a present danger, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And so now, I mean, I really take it seriously. I've had the protection that I need when I go out. I have the mask, and I'm very hesitant even though things are opening back up, as you said, I'm not rushing out there. I mean, I love going shopping as much as anybody else because, almost every weekend I was ready to go to the mall somewhere. But I
Yeah.
mean, I'm sheltered in place. I'm ordering online if I need something. And I'm not ready to rush out there. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And Michigan is struggling with that right now. And it's been an ongoing issue for the past few weeks with the governor and people who really want to get out. And I'm just kind of just sitting back. I'm in no rush. I've been to work maybe twice in the past couple of weeks, but they're taking precautions and safeties and things like that. So, but other than that, like restaurants, movies, and it's just not time for that. It's really not.
And see, I'm looking at the governor's daily broadcast and everything, and I know there's, like you said, there's a huge amount of pressure from their constituents and everything to reopen. And I'm seeing things like change.org petitions for reopening of the schools, and people are saying, well, what about they're going to miss school and they're going to be behind, and people say, well, the businesses are going to close. But my thing is this: if we don't take the necessary precautions, and it's just my opinion, then I'm concerned about what about the lives that could be lost, and so, it's a very hard decision. And my heart goes out to the governor, to the president, to everybody has to make these decisions. And,
Right.
we need to be praying for them, praying for the president, praying for, the people in leadership. And that's what the Bible tells us to do, to pray for those that have the authority over us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's definitely a tough time. It's times that we've never seen before, and people really don't know how to act, but I believe that there's more to come. And I'm just going to share this little bit. And,
Take
and
your time.
I remember in the Bible where Jesus, I think it's in Mark, Jesus and his disciples were getting ready to go to the other side of I think it was the Jordan River. And he told them, like, let's go to the other side. And everybody was getting in the boat. Jesus never told them that the trip to the other side was going to be easy. It was going to be calm. It was going to be peaceful. But he did tell them that we were going to the other side. And we all know that the storm arose. Jesus is in the bottom of the boat asleep. And I believe that he was down there asleep for two reasons. Number one is because he had been preaching all day, and he was God and flesh. So I believe that his flesh was physically tired. But I also believe that he was down there asleep because he wanted the disciples to remember how they acted in the time of the storm. Instead of what they knew about God being peace for them, they were in an uproar. We wasn't expecting the storm. It's going crazy. We're going to die. We're going to perish. And I believe that this is also kind of what's happening now. I believe that it's been allowed to go as long as it has because we need to check ourselves. You know what I'm saying? Especially as Christians, like, how do we act when storms arise? Do we go crazy and believe that we're going to die, or do we allow the faith that we have in God to overrule all of that, keep us calm, keep us sane, and keep pushing us forward?
I agree with that because it always comes to me like, I'll think, well, when I come to a trial or tribulation, the first thought is kind of like, oh, Lord, I'm trying to live for you, but I got this thing going on. But it is a true testimony to how you deal with things, because you have to keep the faith. And sometimes, even though we're saved, we still panic, but we know that God is in control. So I totally, I totally agree with you that through the test, we do have to keep our faith and just believe in God, because it's a time when a lot of people are panicking. Although I'm cautious, I don't listen to the governor's report every day. I don't listen. I don't stay on Facebook, watching the CNN news and all of that and MSN, because if you keep meditating on those things, you will panic. But I try to think on the word of God. I try to meditate. I pray. I listen to gospel music. I watch TV. I do other things to kind of keep my mind off of it, because you can't allow it to feed on you. So that's something I try to concentrate on. And, I was one of those that always said, well, God, I want to spend more time with you. I want to do more devotion, more prayer, read your word. So it was like, once we got to stay at home orders, it was like, okay, I said I want to do these things. So it was the perfect opportunity to do these things, because I was so busy. I really feel like I was neglecting my walk with God, And so I think it's a huge opportunity for us to, like you said, reflect on ourselves and begin to build our relationship with God.
Absolutely. And if I could say one thing about faith, and because I know I've mentioned faith a lot since this interview started, understand something. My faith does not cause me to be stupid, or we a lot of times we use the term crazy faith. Well, my faith isn't crazy. I believe in God and I trust God for everything, but God has also given me wisdom to take the necessary precautions. You know what I'm saying? So when the governor says, and this is the issue that I've had with Christians, and I know that this is a little bit off topic.
No, go ahead, help yourself.
But the order for the nation is to stay home. And I think the only people that I saw really in an uproar were Christians, church people. Oh, we ain't staying at home. We got faith. We got belief. We gonna go have church and business as usual. And then you start seeing these cases and diseases and sicknesses breaking out in some of these churches. And we've seen some highly esteemed people in the church world get sick and perish during this time. So God never told us to be crazy. He never told us to be ignorant. He told us to have faith, and he also told us to be wise, to use wisdom. He told the people of Israel to shut yourselves up in your homes until these plagues and things pass over. When the death angel came through Egypt and the Israelites were there, he told them to stay inside, put the blood on the doorpost, and the death angel will pass you by. But if you get caught outside, you will perish as well. So I've had struggles understanding why we can't just fall in line with what the law of the land is saying. The Bible also speaks about us obeying the law of the land, and not doing so would bring punishment up on us. So I have faith, but I also have the mind that God gave me. And it tells me that when I go outside, okay, just put the mask on. Just put the gloves on. It ain't going to kill me. You know what I'm saying? When I come back, I got some hand sanitizer in the car. Trying to be cautious, because the disease is real. And it's not something that picks out anybody in particular. It picks out whoever it wants to. You know what I'm saying? And anybody can catch it. And I just feel like we as Christians need to show the rest of the world the love of God, but also the wisdom of God in this time, and stop letting faith, as you say, be the reason for craziness. That's just not the will of God.
No, I love that you said that, because what went back in my mind, I've had similar discussions with some close relatives. And what goes back in my mind is when Satan tempted Jesus and he took him up to the high mountain and told him, cast yourself down, and Jesus told me, he said, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. So people don't realize that when you just go out there and say, I'm a Christian, I can do this, I can do that, you're tempting God. I trust God, but I'm not going to step out in front of a car. That's tempting God. So I really agree with you about wisdom. I think that there's a wisdom that's lacking sometimes, and not just with others, with myself, and God will have to counsel me, and he'll give me a scripture like this, say, hey, now think about this. Because I had someone ask me about going somewhere, and I said, no, I'm not going anywhere, and it was like, well, don't you trust God? And I was like, I trust God, but I'm not going to tempt God. See, there's a difference. Trusting him, if something does happen to you, he can bring it through. But don't willfully go out there and say, hey, I'm going to put myself in harm's way because I'm a Christian and I know I'm protected, So, and I think that there's a pressure amongst the Christian community as I watched some churches close. And of course, our church went to virtual services. Mm-hmm. But some of them closed, some of them stayed open. And I'm not going to ever tell anybody what they should do. You serve the Lord the way that he leads you to serve him. You lead the way the Lord leads you to lead your people. But as I watched that, I wondered, and I'm sure this, and I did, like I said, I talked to some relatives, and I know this has occurred, that the person would say, are you coming to church? And they're like, no, I'm not coming to church. What about the stay-at-home orders? Well, do you trust God? So it becomes a test of, are you really saved, or do you trust God? Those types of pressures. And sometimes it comes from other believers, and I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's fair to put that kind of pressure on anybody to tell me, because I'm doing this, trying to abide by the laws of the land. The word of God tells us to abide by the laws of the land, that I should be pressure put on me. Like, I call it like peer pressure. So I guess it'd be like church. No, let me see. I don't know. Pressure, like peer pressure. And so to say, hey, if you're saved, you trust God, you ought to come to church. That's not fair. And
it's absolutely not. Absolutely not fair. I don't think that you should be making anybody to feel like their relationship is God is not what it should be, because they're choosing to use wisdom and faith in this time. And I've heard that. I've heard it from the pulpit all the way to the back. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are preachers and pastors who are calling people faithful just because they're coming out to churches this time. So I'm not faithful because I'm not there. You know what I'm saying? Like, and those things cause issue amongst the brethren and the sisters, you know what I'm saying? And I just feel like that's really not right. That's not right at all.
And it's not the time for division. It's the time for unity. And I just pray and ask God to keep me humble. And, I always try to see the other person's side, and so I respect those that are going out there and having the services. I respect the ones that are not. But as for me, I'm trying to obey the laws of the land, and then take into consideration, my own personal health and safety. And the thing I think that some people don't realize is not just your health and safety, but it's everybody that you have to be around. It's not just me, it's my husband, it's my sons, my family. And sometimes you have to also consider the ones you love, because I read so many stories about, even recently, in Tipton, Tennessee, about this family. They had this gathering, they tried to follow the CDC guidelines, and several of them ended up sick. So those are some things that we have to consider in this time. And just because we're saved, it doesn't mean to just jump out in danger and say, oh, I know God got my back, because, that's just not right. That's not what we do. So I agree with you.
Yeah. And the fact that, I know at the time that I had gotten sick, they were saying that you could have been exposed to COVID-19 a week before you even start to show symptoms. So, I mean, who can track? Like, there is no way I can positively say where I contracted it from, because a week before I started showing symptoms, I was in multiple places. I was at work, I was at the gym, I was at the mall, I was at church. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not, you can't just say, if I'm here, I'm safe, because the guy next to you might be 3 days into having COVID and not even know it yet. You know what I'm saying? So it's good to just take the precaution, be patient, be wise, be safe.
And I agree, because a lot of countries are talking about, I know, like France, talking about they recovered quickly because of the contact tracing. But I mean, as Americans, I don't know how it is in France, but I know as Americans, we move around a lot. We come into contact with a lot of people within a short time. So it's very difficult to see like the origin of the infection if you get it. I agree with you. So I just know that God's in control and that we put our trust in him. And I know that he didn't originate the coronavirus, but I know he's able to heal us from it. And I truly believe that he's going to cause a cure to come about. I believe that. But in the meantime, I mean, I agree. I totally agree that we need to use wisdom and temperance and try to think this thing out and, not be quick to do things that may not be necessary. So I just totally agree. And I really appreciate you for coming on here, for talking to us. Did you have anything else that you want to say?
And trust God, no matter what happens. Trust God. If there's anybody who's watching who is dealing with this sickness, God can heal you. He will heal you. Put your trust, put your faith in God. If you know anybody who's dealing with it, encourage them and to do the same thing, to just trust God, believe God. It might be a good time to even share God with people who don't know God. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just encourage each other. Let's be smart. Let's be wise. Let's be patient. Let's be safe.
That's right. Let's be safe. And just keep praying that the cure comes about, and we just keep praying, and I keep praying for my family, asking him to protect us and shield us and bless us. And I certainly will keep praying for you, Brother Mike. I appreciate you so much.
Yes.
And I'm just so impressed with the young man that you've become. You already were kind, and I'm so thankful to God that you're over this thing, that you beat this thing, and you're out there telling people, hey, if you get the diagnosis, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the story, because God's in control, and that's the
Absolutely.
truth. That's the truth. You just have to trust in him. It's no time to panic. It's no time to fret. Let's put our trust in God. And use this. I mean, it's just an awesome opportunity to get to know your family and spend time with your family. I just, to study, read the word of God, to work on new hobbies, whatever it is, because you may not get this chance again, so we just have to thank God for all things, try to keep things in perspective. So,
Absolutely.
any final words?
Oh, no, I'm good. I thanks you for having me on, for even asking me, because I had just kind of moved on, from it. But I really appreciate you allowing me to share it again. And like I said earlier, forgive the Corona cut.
Yep.
It's just the time that we living in. But thank you.
I understand, and thank you so much. And you be blessed, and your family be blessed. And they don't know me, but tell your wife I said hello, or your baby.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This has been another episode of Renee Talks. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and turn on your notifications. Thank you.